The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planted. I'm Sara, your host. And today we have Jesus Burrola, CEO of Posibl, on the show. Jesus, welcome. I'm so excited about talking to you today. I did a lot of reading about you before we did the show today, and you have a lot of really exciting things to share with us. So before we really get into the company, I'd love to hear about your first cannabis experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm excited to be here, too. Really, my first cannabis experience, I was a little bit more of a late bloomer, if you will. I grew up, I was born and raised in Mexico, and like probably what people probably think, Mexico is a very conservative on you know, quote unquote, cannabis is seen as a drug, right? And when I was growing up, and so I think because of the effects of war on drugs directly to Mexico, which has obviously led to cartels and all those other things, it's just seen as very dangerous, and there actually was no differentiation, you know, in Mexico growing up between cannabis, which is, you know, so natural a plant, and say something like a hard drug. And so I was, you know, raised up to be very afraid of cannabis, and it wasn't until I came to the States when I was 18 years old that I actually saw cannabis for the first time. So, you know, I know that's a long-winded answer, but it was actually offered to me by the father of a friend, which I thought I was being set up. I thought I was going to get arrested or something. I'm like, I can't believe, you know, it's actually an adult, a parent, son's there, and he's offered me cannabis. I thought I was on some kind of prank joke or being set up, but that was it.
Oh, that's awesome. It's, you know, it's always interesting the first time. I have several friends that their families are from Mexico, and one of the things they said very similar things to me, but then they also said, and I'm wondering if you experienced this, it was very taboo, but at the same time, a couple of them had grandmothers who grew it and kept it in a jar with alcohol under their bed, and they actually used it as a topical because they had leg pain.
Yes, from a topical standpoint, absolutely. That is definitely more common. I mean, frankly, I never was around the plant and anybody like smoking it or consuming it in that way. But you're absolutely right. You would always hear of like, you know, more of a cream, an ointment, pain medication. You would definitely hear that.
Yeah, I remember talking to the friends, and they were shocked when they realized what Grandma had under the bed. Like, they were just like, I just thought it was a home remedy, and I was like, yeah, well, you're right. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
but it does show that.
And it was.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I mean, for me, it was so weird because alcohol is so widely accepted. I mean, you know, it was very normal for your parents to know you were out drinking and you were 14 years old. And I mean, drinking and driving at 15, right? So it's you know, looking back on all this now with the context of understanding the plant and the effects, it's just so backwards, frankly.
Yeah. When I was looking at going into Posibl and how that started, when I was looking at your bio, I saw that you have a bachelor's in supply chain management. And it was interesting when I saw that because I remember years ago when I was one of the chairs of the task force and I was working with, you know, people in education, universities, colleges, and explaining to them, I don't think you understand, like, these are jobs that, like, people will start working, actively looking for jobs in supply chain management, all these different areas that have more technical knowledge because of cannabis. And they looked at me incredulously. And when I saw that on your bio, I was like, see? See what happens? I mean, I know that you did that prior to being involved in cannabis, but it's just, it's showing like how people with all this expertise are coming into the field and enriching it and really getting us up to speed to where we should be as an industry. And with that being said, how did Posibl come to be, and how did you decide to come work in cannabis?
Yes, so it actually was founded by a guy by the name of David Bon, who, funny enough, we grew up together. So I've known David since we were probably about 8, 9 years old. So he is a very good friend of mine. His background is in agriculture, and I think the way it really came to be is he operates some of the largest organic greenhouse farms in Mexico, so more on the tomato and vegetable side. And so when the cannabis business was being formed and, starting to look at that, it really comes down to it's an agricultural business to be a grower. And he had seen the effects of, high-tech greenhouses and what that's done for the vegetable market. And so, when you looked at the growing methodologies in cannabis traditionally, I think it was not about what was the most efficient, but like how you had to grow it based on the fact that it was illegal. So you either had to, go out to Humboldt, be on the hills, be away, from enforcement, or you had to do it in an indoor setting. That really is where how the plant was being grown. It wasn't necessarily because it's the most efficient way to grow. So you don't see tomatoes being grown in basements, right? Because it's just not very efficient. So really, I think it was that vision to say, hey, the best way to grow is a combination of that, which is being able to control your environment, but at the same time taking advantage of a great growing climate and all the natural resources. So you shouldn't have to produce 100% of your, light, which is what you have to do as an indoor grower. You can actually take advantage of natural sunlight. And yes, if you want a higher quality, you have to supplement that with, lighting and CO2 and everything else. But why start from zero when, Mother Nature is already providing a lot of what you need to grow exceptional cannabis. So it was, really his vision. And he and I had always talked about being in business together. There's a funny story because we actually, the first business that we ever did was together. So we ran a cevicheria in Mexico when we were in our teens. And so, I think we had always had like the entrepreneurial itch, and we went our separate ways for a long, long time. So he grew his agricultural business tremendously. I went and worked in supply chain, in the building materials industry. And when this opportunity with, in this new field, and we were obviously both excited about cannabis and wanted to participate and play a hand in forming this new industry, it just made sense for us to team up and try to tackle that.
That's really cool. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be able to do work with somebody who's known you throughout the development of into adulthood. That's like the people who know the stories about what you're like as a kid, and there's that certain trust when you're working with, a childhood friend. And I love the fact that you do the greenhouse, because there is something to be said. There's nothing like the sun. When we look at indoor growing, yes, people say, oh, these lights are full spectrum, but we have such a limited knowledge of what full spectrum is with light. I mean, nature is constantly surprising us, with new knowledge. Even when we look at the plant with all of the different terpenes and the cannabinoids that are being discovered, nature is way more complicated than we give it credit for. And I love the fact that you combine nature with technology, which sustainability is a huge part of Posibl's work, correct?
No, correct. I mean, most folks don't know, but indoor grow is highly non-sustainable. And when you look at, who your average cannabis consumer is, we care about sustainability. And so, I think there's some crazy stats out there for California, like something as high as like 2% of the electric grid is going just to cannabis growing. And you look at states like Massachusetts, they're saying it might be 3 to 4%. And so it's definitely not 3 or 4% of the GDP of Massachusetts. So it is taking up a lot of energy. to grow in an indoor setting. And I think energy's not cheap either. So that also translates into higher prices. So I think as the industry evolves, and obviously we're seeing it now with, price compression in the market, I think having the efficiencies of being able to take advantage of natural resources, which ultimately reduces your cost, and I would argue increases the quality of your product, I think is the best mix of both worlds.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when I first started working in the dispensary, and we would have greenhouse and outdoor grown cannabis. And at that point in time, I was very, very new to everything. And so I always felt that indoor was superior to sun grown. But what I didn't realize was that the conditions were so much more controlled, and that people who were doing greenhouse and sun grown at that point in time maybe weren't up to speed on the best ways to grow it. Because when I had my first sun-grown flower that was just so well grown, it blew me away, the difference between that and what I had been smoking with indoor flower. And that was what turned me on to the fact that you can get really interesting cannabinoid content, that the flavor was different and the effects were more nuanced in my experience.
Yes, and I would 100% agree with you. I think the effects of sun-grown flower are incredible. And there is a happy medium, so you talked about supply chain. I think the complexity of that is that, because I agree, I love outdoor flower. The hard part is that you cannot get year-round supply. So that is one of the setbacks, right? You have one harvest a year.
Right.
And so then it becomes, as fantastic as it is, it's very hard to power a year-round brand and build a brand around outdoor, because you have a limited shelf life on the product. And so that is another thing that I think Greenhouse is able to tackle, that you can maintain year-round production, have all the benefits of, the sun, be able to control your environment like an indoor, and then have a cost curve that's going to land somewhere in the middle. And so, I think I'm a huge believer in greenhouse technology, and obviously that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and when you're talking about brands being able to sustainably provide flower throughout the year, that's also part of some of your mission, is empowering other brands, right?
Yes, so really Posibl is set up as a B2B vehicle. So we know what we know and we know what we don't know. And I think common mistake is say, hey, I want to, everybody says vertically integrated, and sure, there's a lot of advantages in doing that, but there's also a lot of complexity, because you're trying to run 4 or 5 different businesses if you set that way. And obviously capital is very difficult to come by in cannabis, and everything is very expensive to develop. And so we felt, as opposed to watering down and trying to be the best at 5 different businesses, we wanted to really build a team of experts around what we understood to be our core strength, which was the ag and tech aspect of being a grower, and focus all our efforts into becoming the best greenhouse grower that we could. And so we, obviously there needs to be a way to commercialize, our outputs, and that's really where our brand partners come into play. So we empower about 15 of the largest brands in California that we work with. So they are an extension of Posibl. So we sit down with brands, we plan everything from what genetics they want to put into the jars and what volumes, and we package and we help them build products up to their specifications to put into the market. So our success as a business is very tied into the success of the brands that we support, and it is seen as very much of a partnership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing when you look into all the different ways of doing business in cannabis and all the different permits and everything that comes into play. And that can be really, really overwhelming, or even discourage people from getting into the industry. So to have you doing this work, and would I be correct in saying that this would be classified as the white labeling of products?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And I know, that term sometimes has negative connotations, but I don't see it that way. I would rather partner with the best brands that are marketing experts, that have connections, that have built a following. And I would rather focus my efforts in being the best possible grower and builder of product that I can for them. You mentioned one other important aspect of that, which is the licensing. I mean, one of the benefits actually of working with Posibl is we work with a lot of brands that don't have a license. So under an asset-light model. So if us as the licensed cultivator, selling to a licensed distributor that is ultimately selling it to a licensed retailer, and really a lot of the brands operate under the licensing of all the partnerships set up throughout the supply chain to reach the consumer. And so that saves a brand a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of complexity and having to go through that licensing process. And actually, it is what is allowing those brands to penetrate into multiple markets, which ultimately I think that's how the successful brands will be built. Like, folks will want to build nationwide brands, and the fastest and most effective way to do that is through, kind of an asset-light model like the one that Posibl can power.
Yeah, well, it's like what they say, the wise person surrounds himself with experts. Why, if you're not a grower, but you have an amazing vision for a product and you're really good at the outreach and actually creating the idea and the lifestyle and the brand around it, why wouldn't you pick somebody who has more expertise in actually creating that product to fulfill your vision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes ego gets in the way, but no, I think we're very focused in doing what is our core vision, which is to try to really push the boundaries on ag, bring the latest technology, become more sustainable, and ultimately have the planning and production and to be able to power our brand partners.
And when we're getting into that, we had a brief conversation before we started recording today, and you were talking about that you don't have your own brand flower, but that you're looking at possibly doing that in the future, and just about the visibility in the cannabis industry, that especially with the fact that there really aren't a lot of prominent Latino brands on the market.
Yeah, we see that as an opportunity, and I'm born and raised in Mexico. So is basically most of the folks that work here are Latino. So that goes from C-suite down to everybody working in the greenhouse and in the packaging facility, and we've been waiting for a brand that speaks to us as Latinos in cannabis, and we frankly haven't seen it. And when you look at industries like alcohol, or you look at industries like beer, you have a huge, very big brands, whether it be Jose Cuervo or Corona or Modelo, right, that everybody has heard of and sit in the top 10 of beer brands or alcohol brands. And when you look at cannabis in California, I think the highest, the most sold Latino brand, and I would even argue that it's not as, very Latino focused, I think is ranked 151. So I see that as a very wide open lane. And when I've talked to our brand partners, they all mention it. Yeah, we see that as an opportunity, but we don't have the authenticity to talk to that customer as, non-Latino people in cannabis, and they've all kind of said, you should absolutely go for it. You guys are, kind of who we think of when we think of Latinos in cannabis, so you guys should absolutely chase it.
Yeah, well, and when we're looking at standards, because, we all see the world through our own lenses, and this is going to be, this is maybe a strange comparison, so bear with me. But when I worked in civil rights, my boss, the executive director, she had come from MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Fund. And she was telling me that, because of the way people see different things and the way the lenses through which they see the world, a lot of times when you're not necessarily a Caucasian organization, you can be seen differently and held to different standards, which is why she said that at her job back then, everybody had to come to work in like a suit and men had to wear ties because they were like, we want to be taken seriously. We're, professionals. We do all this stuff. But when she came to work with us, she was like, it's really nice to be able to let your hair down and have some casual days and not be held to such high standards because you're constantly trying to prove something. Do you see that in the cannabis sphere? I know we're a lot more relaxed as an industry, but especially as we start to see larger companies coming in that have had outside interests, and we're seeing MSOs, and we're seeing just like that corporate mindset. Do you see there being challenges for everybody's lens to be represented in the industry?
You know what? I think I have seen. I don't think it's exclusion on that sense, more on the demographic. I think the biggest exclusion is really the access to capital, and so I see that as it's such a huge barrier to entry in cannabis. I mean, the amount of money it takes to start a cannabis business, let's just say a grow, it's so asset heavy, it's significant. And so that, naturally excludes, a lot of the minorities in it, right? And so we talk about it being, a wealth creation opportunity for minorities, but nobody talks about, well, where is that capital going to come from for those minorities to participate in the industry? And that's, I think, the biggest question. It's not going to come from banks. It's not, there's no access to capital in that way. So that is what I see. It's like there's a lack of representation of minorities, and I think it's not because I think folks in the industry don't want it. It's because at the end of the day, it requires so much capital, and that unfortunately typically doesn't sit in minorities' hands.
Yeah. Well, it speaks to the fact that we really do need to lower the barrier for entry. I mean, it seemed like that was initially in our pie in the sky ideas what, Prop 64 was supposed to be all about, was getting people in the door. But now we've got so many people who have actually left this market and gone back to the traditional market because they can't survive in a way that, well, we've been talking sustainability, that is sustainable. So, thank goodness that there are things like credit unions and things like that starting to get involved, but I know we have a long, long way to go.
Long way to go. And I don't have an answer, and I don't know that necessarily anybody does, because even when there's been carve-outs on licensing for social equity members per se, okay, well, now you got a license, you still need a lot of money to be able to do something with that license. So you're basically just saying, okay, well, you want the license, but then you got to turn around and sell it because you still need, millions of dollars to do something with it. And so even the good ideas fall short. And I think that's the frustrating part.
Yeah, it is frustrating. There's a lot of loopholes that end up benefiting other people, like what we've been seeing here. And I'm in the Bay Area, and so you see equity operators that have been taken advantage of by larger companies where they want their permits, but then when it comes down to it, the ownership isn't there, and they don't really have a say in how the business is run. They're just kind of there, and it's really troubling.
It is troubling, and I've seen cities that have said, okay, well, we're going to protect social equity members, and so they're not able to be diluted. you know, which is, again, a great idea. But then how do you raise money for your project if you cannot get the, like, it doesn't become a very promising proposition for an investor, right? And so,
Right.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's such a complicated problem to solve, and it's worth solving. So I hope that a lot of smart people get together and find something that does work. I just haven't seen anything work up until this point. I mean, you're in the Bay Area. I met yesterday with the folks at the Success Center there that are helping social equity members launch businesses. And, you know, I was talking to them about how to launch a brand, but, you know, even that is complicated, because even when you go an asset-light model and you partner with somebody like us, and there's still a lot of capital required to market and, you know, launch a brand, even under that scenario. So, yeah, it's a complicated problem, but one worth solving, and hopefully there's good ideas that come into play that can help get more representation in the industry for minorities.
I hope so. I actually had Miss Angela from Success Centers on, I believe it was last year. I love her. She's wonderful.
She's awesome.
Yeah, but, you know, one of the things is, like, you know, even those organizations being able to get technical support, it's an interesting conundrum, because you have, like, you know, private practitioners that are, you know, looking for grant money to support these groups, which, you know, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But one thing I was really excited about was my old organization that I used to work with, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area. They have a program called Legal Services for Entrepreneurs. And through that, and I always say we, even though I haven't been there in a while, but I'm still very much in touch with my colleagues.
It's we. You're doing all the work.
we got to keep it we. But, you know, it's reaching out to them and saying, hey, you know, now that we're in a certain space where we can start having conversations around cannabis businesses, because, you know, back when I was working at LCCR, you couldn't touch cannabis with a 10-foot pole. But now that's changing, and it's like, how do we utilize these nonprofits that are not only able to support this, but any sort of funding that might go in to support them would actually be, in turn, coming back into the community to support social justice issues. So I reached out to them to ask, hey, you know, these pro bono attorneys that are working in the Legal Services for Entrepreneurs program, because that's what it is. It's like the big firms have pro bono attorneys, and they're like, we want to help people thrive in their businesses. You know, are there any that are interested in helping equity applicants? And I was so pleasantly surprised to hear that attorneys had actually been reaching out to them saying, hey, if you have any cannabis businesses in the LSC program, we want to help. And so, you know, it's like there's more of these organizations are starting to feel comfortable and excited about doing the work. So I think we need to really do more outreach and link up with them and get these people talking. Because I got Miss Angela talking to them, and they were going to do some events together. And that I just feel like it makes perfect sense, because then you're getting this, I don't know, excuse me if this sounds a little hippy-dippy, but more of a perpetuosity circle where, you know, these groups they're not just taking the grant money and working on their own projects that have nothing to do with equity and social justice. They're continuing the work, and it's not only going into cannabis, but in other areas that benefit everybody around social justice. Especially especially the populations who need it the most, because it's amazing. I was just my last guest that I was talking to, Otha Smith. We were talking about how when I worked in civil rights was when Obama was elected, and we were very excited. Everybody got the morning off to watch the inauguration, but when we got back, what we found was, you know, our development department was having problems getting grants because people were like, oh, well, you know, the fight's over. Now we're going to give to other organizations that need it more than civil rights. And we were like, oh no,
No,
it's
we
not
still need
done.
it. Yep, yep. Well,
We have so much
certainly
more.
not done. It seemed like we went a little backwards since then recently, so or at least it feels that way sometimes. No, but I actually think everybody has to play a part, right? So, I mean, starting with the consumer. I mean, they should support brands that, are from their community, that have a social equity component, and in any way. I mean, even if it's not owned by social equity, that support causes on social equity. And the dispensary has to play a part and say, we are going to position social equity brands in our shelf, et cetera, all throughout the chain. So I think, hopefully that, but it all, I think, has to start with the consumer dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely have to vote with your dollars. And I think it's also really important to, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about for a few years now is people actually having conversations about their cannabis use. Like when we were going into legalization and, I was still working in the dispensary then and having people in tears on the other side of the bar being like, I can't afford what I need to create relief for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And or just being pissed off at the prices and the availability of product. And one of the things that, I used to say was, this is, it's kind of like Stoner Civics 101. It's just like, when we passed legalization, people were showing up at our front door being like, oh, can we purchase now? It's like, no, you got to wait a year. Well, why? Well, you pass it and then you create the foundation, right? Then you create the program. Nobody does anything till anything's passed. But then when it's passed and you don't like what you're seeing, it's up to the public to talk to our public officials and policymakers and say, I pay taxes. I'm, a productive member of society. I use cannabis and I vote. So what you going to do?
It's like I mean, and, you look at things like dispensaries, and 2/3 of the city, even in a state like California that is overwhelmingly approving of cannabis, and it's been legalized here recreational for how long now, and 2/3 of the city still don't have a dispensary because I think that's such a weird part of it where people say, oh, it still carries that stigma where people say, oh no, I'm for legal cannabis and I want to be able to go to a dispensary. I just don't want to go to a dispensary in my neighborhood. Put it in the neighborhood next door. And I still. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I've kind of taken that stigma out. And I mean, frankly, thank you for all the work that you're doing on the education and on the politics side too. It's super important and very needed.
Oh, thank you. I feel so strongly about that. And especially when, a lot of our policies are based around stigma, not fact. And just even through the education side, when you are able to educate somebody and they're able to successfully use it, and then all of a sudden they're so mad that, they've been held in place by this stigma, like whether they were kept away from relief because they thought that they would be doing a bad thing, and they've tried every single drug that they possibly could that's, safe enough for them to use to help with their pain, and then they find that this helps. Or just, people just not even going that extreme on the medical side, but people just thinking, hey, I found relief and this is way better for me than having a couple glasses of wine at night, and it's not really a big deal. And the person who works behind the bar is a really friendly, nice person, and they obviously do not let children in because I was mad the last time I forgot my ID and I'm well over 21 and they still wouldn't let me through the door. It's like dispelling of the myths to get people to understand that we've been subject to, a lot of falsehoods to control a situation. And also and talking about whether we look at it as medicinal or recreational, it's a substance that creates a reaction in the body, and that, everyone's different. Like, just creating the way to look at it critically and know that it doesn't work for everybody, and not everybody is able to consume phytocannabinoids, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. It's about figuring out what works well for you as an individual.
Yeah. And on the medicinal aspect, I know you talked about access for folks that necessarily can't afford it. I do got to give a shout out to an organization that we've worked with before called Dear Cannabis that does go out and provide cannabis patients that cannot afford it. So we've worked with them in the past, and I think they it's a phenomenal organization that people should be aware of.
Yeah, Dear Cannabis is wonderful. They have really grown leaps and strides with, their program started out just the other year. It was so small, and they've grown in the way they've partnered with people. It's beautiful. I love the fact that so many more people are understanding the need for that, and that, the compassion programs need to come in all shapes and forms, from, organizations like Dear Cannabis that touch on, they do large drops for compassion patients. Like, they cover a lot of patients, to like the dispensary on the corner that just has like a small program for their immediate community. I mean, creating that access is incredibly important, because I know, like, when I was going through cancer, and, and I wasn't working, but I had a job with benefits, and it's incredibly expensive to be sick. And then if you've been critically ill for a really long time, and you are just solely living off of, the government benefits, which, thank goodness, we have short-term and long-term disability, but it's still not enough for people to live, especially in California and especially in the Bay.
Mm-hmm. It's so expensive, yeah.
It is.
And it's, I think maybe I voiced some of the frustrations, but overall, when you look at it and you hear of, well, frankly, folks like yourself, organizations like Dear Cannabis, the Success Center, there are a lot of heroes in the industry too that are pushing things forward. And overall, I think that when you step back, I mean, it's hard when you're in the business and you're running up against, regulatory, walls and compliance laws all day, every day. But when you step back, the industry has come such a long way, and you see the trend. So, which is in the right direction.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have really good hearts doing a lot of great work, and I think it is really important to hold, especially like, groups like Dear Cannabis, Weed for Warriors, like really like highlighting what they're doing so people understand that not only will they support them, but maybe they'll be inspired to do good work as well, because it is all hands on deck. And,
yes.
And looking at, like, just thinking about, like, I was thinking about the legacy aspect of, because we did, come from the critically and chronically ill. This is how this whole thing started around legalization. But then there's also the legacy around genetics. And you guys have been doing some really interesting work with cannabis genetics, right?
Yes, and frankly, it's through partnerships from folks in the legacy market that have been developing strains for a long time. So we're very proud to form those relationships and work with people like Mean Gene from Freeborn Selections, and Skunk Tech, and J Trees from Diesel Cartel. That really, we formed a relationship to, because there is a level of trust involved in sharing genetics, to be able to put some of those genetics into the legal market, at scale, to really get people to try these fantastic genetics that they've created over many, many years, and folks have not had an opportunity to try.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to try some of those. That's the stuff that, like, back in the 215 days, we used to get such amazing genetics from growers, and just like the bud profiles, the colors, the scents. Of course, I'm totally spoiled because when I was behind the bar, we were still measuring out. And there's just really nothing like opening that jar and being able to let somebody smell exactly what you're going to send home with them. But I just am so happy to hear that you're working with them to preserve genetics and get that out so that people can share in that, because quite honestly, there are some superstars in the market, but in a lot of ways I feel like we've been kind of living in the land of mids for a while.
Yes, for sure. And, people talk about migrating folks from traditional market to the legal market. And, the truth is that, today some of the best genetics still are only found in the legacy market. And so if you really want to bring consumers into the legal market, you have to provide a pathway where those genetics can enter, the legal market. And again, the barriers to entry, which we talked about earlier, are so steep that unless you lower that barrier to entry and you make those connections, we're not going to get there. And ultimately, I think it's where we've got to head.
Right. And even if you have those amazing genetics in stores, if you're not growing them in a sustainable way, how accessible are they for people?
Mm-hmm. And in scale, right? You want to cover California on a strain, you need scale to do that, and which is not hard, which is not easy. So,
yeah,
I think part of that is, there's good there's a lot of good actors in the industry. There's also a lot of bad actors, and so a lot of those folks have been burned, right? And so they're also within cannabis. I think there needs to be a bridge built between legacy market and legal market, and to kind of work together, right? I think there's a common goal of getting people, to embrace the plant. That is a shared mission, but there's a little bit of a bridge to build there as well.
Yeah, there is. Well, I know, some colleagues and I in the past have joked that, it's joking, not joking, that wish there was a way to have, an unofficial list of the people that are not good actors that you can avoid so that you don't have that bad experience, because, there are so many wonderful people that just want to collaborate and work and see everybody thrive, but all you have to do is have one bad experience that'll ruin your business, your livelihood.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, looking into the future, what are you seeing and what are you excited about?
Well, I mean, I am excited definitely about the launch of the UMA brand. We just broke ground as well with the new phase of our project. So I talked about wanting to build, the farm of the future with the latest technology. So we've been working on designing and getting approval, and then ultimately funding to build the next phase of our project, which is, a very high-tech glass Venlo semi-closed system with a lot of technology in it. And so that construction is finally broken ground after many, many years. So it is very exciting for us to take that leap as a business.
That's awesome. To me, everything that you're doing, it just seems like your growing methods are going to be the footprint for the future to inspire other people to create sustainable farming practices.
Thank you.
If people want to get a hold of you and follow you on social media, how would they do that?
So they can go through our website, www.posibl, spelled Posibl, project.com, all one word, or on Instagram, same handle, Posibl, Posibl, project is our handle.
Awesome.
There's actually, I would invite people to follow. We've got a lot of great content, so we're building an educational series that tackles all the different processes at the farm. So it's been in the works here for the last 5 months. So that is quickly going to be launching in social media, so we're excited to kind of share some of our knowledge and our practices with people.
That's awesome. And I know I'm going to ask you a question, and if it's no, that's completely okay, because I understand. I know that sometimes when you're growing for other companies, that is kept secret because they want to have their own standalone brand. But if people wanted to try your flower, are there brands that you've partnered with that they can look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would say there's definitely brands on both sides of the spectrum. There's brands that actually do look to highlight the farm as well, that want to play kudos to the folks that help them grow. So an example would be Union Electric, who is all about showcasing the farm and telling the story of, why they curate these strains and these specific farms. So Union Electric would be, a brand that we do a lot for.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to keep an eye out for them. Where are they? Are they distributed in are they throughout California, or where are they distributed?
Throughout California.
Awesome. I'm going to check them out because I really want to check out your flower. I'm so excited about this, and I'm really, really excited to see what you do in the future. I love innovation and just your thoughtful approach. Just really, I'm just so impressed.
Yeah, and I'll throw another brand out there. Cheech and Chong is another brand that we support, which is a crown achievement for us, right? To have somebody that probably sits in the Mount Rushmore of cannabis,
right?
And being able to power their brand. So that's cool.
That's really cool. Well, it's funny. I was seeing that that show that Cheech was doing with Don Johnson, that they were doing a new. I don't know. I don't think it was a series, but maybe they were just doing like a one-off on it, and he was, Don's trying to get Cheech to work with them again, and he's working in a dispensary, and apparently Willie Brown is at the counter during that episode. I was like, way to go, Cheech.
I'll have to catch that.
Yeah, I haven't checked it out yet, but I was reading about it, and it just made me chuckle. And then also just to have Willie Brown standing there at the counter purchasing something, that's pretty funny too. Although, I've actually worked with a former SF mayor. Art Agnos is a huge believer in medical cannabis since he started using it in his 80s. So I think that, conversation is normalization, and to have, beloved figures actually embracing it is a huge step for us too.
Agree.
Thank you so much for being with me today. It's just a pleasure to talk with you and learn more about it. And, as things come up and as you're developing more things with brands, I'd love to have you back on to continue the conversation.
I'd love so. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much for all the work that you do too on the education.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, hey, it's like they say, better together, right? We're all pitching in to make this not only a better industry, but a better movement, and hopefully a lot of the work that we do to change the way we do business, look at cannabis, can filter out into other things in the world. We have a unique opportunity that we really need to take advantage of and create action. Talking about it is a wonderful thing, but talking to somebody who's actually creating the action is just, it's priceless. So thank you. And for people out there who want to follow Planted, we are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. On Instagram and Twitter, we are Planted with Sara. On Facebook, we are Planted with Sara Payan. Our website is www.plantedwithsara, and you can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are on Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon, Google, and Apple. Until next time, everyone, it's a crazy world out there. Stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, be kind to one another, and most importantly, stay curious. Until next time, everyone, take care.